In 2013, Venezuela had more oil than Saudi Arabia on the entire planet. By 2018, you needed a wheelbarrow full of cash just to buy groceries. Not metaphorically, but literally, with actual wheelbarrows filled with stacks of bills. A loaf of bread cost 2.5 million bolivars at the local market. A cup of coffee cost 4 million bolivars at any cafe you visited. This wasn't a natural disaster or a sudden economic shock from outside. This was a monetary disaster created slowly over decades by internal decisions. And it started decades before anyone on the street actually noticed anything. For most of the 20th century, Venezuela was living proof that oil wealth. The country held the largest proven oil reserves on Earth beneath its soil. Caracas looked like Miami, with its gleaming towers and modern infrastructure throughout. The bolivar was called the hardest currency in all of Latin America. Venezuelans traveled abroad and felt wealthy compared to their neighbors in Colombia. The government spent freely because the oil revenue checks kept coming every month. And for a while, that system actually worked well for everyone involved. Until one day, without warning, it suddenly stopped working at all anymore. Here's what most people completely miss about Venezuela's total economic collapse over time. It wasn't just corruption by government officials taking money under the table. It wasn't just socialism or any particular ideology being implemented by leaders. It was something far more fundamental about how money actually works. Venezuela stopped making money the normal way through production and trade anymore. Instead, it began printing money to pay for things oil couldn't cover. At first, just a little bit extra to smooth over budget gaps. Then more and more as the gaps grew wider every single year. Then constantly, every single day, without any plan to ever stop printing. By 2016, the central bank was creating 25% more currency every month. That's not inflation in the traditional sense we usually talk about today. That's currency destruction, the complete annihilation of monetary value over time. And once that process starts, it becomes almost impossible to stop completely. In 2003, the government decided food was too expensive for regular people, so they capped prices on essential goods by law and government decree. Milk, flour, rice, all frozen at so-called affordable levels for consumers nationwide. Farmers couldn't profit anymore, so they simply stopped producing food for sale. Store shelves emptied quickly as inventory sold out and wasn't replaced again. The government responded by printing money to import food from other countries, which made the currency weaker against the dollar and all foreign money, which made imports more expensive, requiring more money to buy the same, which required more printing, creating a loop that fed on itself endlessly. The cycle had begun, and there was no easy way out anymore. By 2010, Venezuela had two different exchange rates operating at the same time. The official rate was 4.3 bolivars per dollar, according to government records. The black market rate was 8 bolivars per dollar on the street. The government insisted the official rate was real and binding for everyone, but no one could actually get dollars at that price in reality, except government officials who had special access to foreign currency exchanges, who would buy dollars at 4.3, then sell them at 8 immediately, and pocket the difference as pure profit, billions leaving the country this way, not through revolution or violence, but through paperwork and official government channels. By 2012, the gap between official and black market rates grew even wider. The official rate stayed frozen, while the black market rate climbed higher daily. Anyone with access to official dollars became instantly wealthy through simple arbitrage. Business owners couldn't get dollars to import goods at the official rate, so they bought on the black market and raised prices to cover costs, which made everything more expensive for ordinary people trying to survive each day. The government blamed businesses for greed, but the system created the incentive. When you create two prices for the same thing, arbitrage always follows. By 2014, oil prices began falling globally, cutting Venezuela's revenue in half. The government had built its entire budget assuming oil would stay expensive. Pensions, subsidies, government salaries, all dependent on oil money flowing in constantly. When the revenue dropped, they had two choices to make immediately: cut spending dramatically and face protests, or print money to maintain spending. They chose printing because cutting felt politically impossible at that moment. Within months, inflation began accelerating from uncomfortable to completely out of control. By 2015, people started hoarding everything, not just food, but toilet paper. Stores would get a shipment, and it would sell out within hours. Lines formed before dawn, people waiting for stores to open their doors. Buying wasn't about need anymore, it was about getting there before others. Because everyone knew that next week, the same item would cost double. Savings accounts became worthless almost overnight, as inflation ate purchasing power completely. A retiree with 20 years of savings could barely afford a week of groceries because the money they saved had evaporated in real terms. People who worked their entire lives found themselves dependent on family abroad. Remittances from relatives in Colombia, Peru, the United States became the lifeline. Without family outside Venezuela, survival became almost impossible for millions of people. By 2016, the currency had lost so much value, the bills weren't worth the paper they were printed on when calculated by material cost. The central bank was printing bills 24 hours a day in shifts, but they couldn't print fast enough to keep up with the collapsing value. ATMs ran out of cash constantly because withdrawal limits were absurdly low. The largest bill was 100 bolivars, worth about 10 cents at that. Time, so withdrawing anything meaningful required hundreds of individual bills to count. Banks started rationing cash, limiting withdrawals to protect their own dwindling supplies. People stopped using banks entirely, keeping cash at home despite the theft risk, because getting your own money from a bank became nearly impossible to do. By 2017, Venezuela entered what economists call hyperinflation, when prices double monthly. Grocery stores change prices multiple times per day, sometimes hourly during busy periods. A chicken breast might cost one price at noon, double by evening. Workers demanded to be paid daily instead of monthly because delay meant loss, their salary losing value between the time earned and the time paid. Restaurants stopped printing menus because the prices changed too fast to keep up with. Waiters would tell you the price verbally when you ordered. Gas stations ran out of fuel, even though Venezuela had endless oil, because the government sold gasoline domestically for nearly free below production cost. Refineries couldn't afford to operate, workers couldn't afford to show up for work, and the entire distribution system collapsed despite abundant crude oil underground. By 2018, ATMs had a withdrawal limit imposed on every single transaction, not because of security concerns or protecting customers from theft or fraud, because the largest bill in circulation was only 100 bolivars in value, worth about 2 cents in US dollars at the black market rate. To buy anything substantial, you needed a bag of cash, literally speaking. People stopped counting bills individually because it took way too much time. They weighed them on scales instead, treating money like a bulk commodity. Money had become a unit of mass, not value or purchasing power. Doctors, lawyers, engineers all abandoned their professions to sell goods on streets, because a day selling candy earned more than a month in professional work. Teachers left classrooms, nurses left hospitals, police stopped showing up for shifts. The economy inverted completely. skilled labor became worthless compared to basic commerce. A petroleum engineer with a decade of experience earned less than a street vendor selling cigarettes, one at a time, to passing pedestrians every day. By 2019, most Venezuelans were using US dollars for real transactions daily, even though it was technically illegal to use foreign currency in business. The government eventually gave up and made it legal because they had no choice, because the alternative was total collapse of all economic activity. Stores that accepted only bolivars had no customers. Everyone avoided them completely. Stores that accepted dollars thrived, creating a two-tier economy almost overnight. If you had access to dollars, you could buy nearly anything available. If you only had bolivars, you were essentially locked out of commerce. This created a new form of inequality based purely on currency access. Here's what happens when money breaks down and loses all its value. People don't panic immediately or run into the streets in complete chaos. They adapt slowly, finding new ways to survive in the new reality. First, they hoard anything stable, any goods that might hold value tomorrow, toilet paper, rice, anything that won't lose value overnight gets bought immediately. Then they barter, trading goods for goods without money in between transactions. Eggs for flour, services for goods, anything to avoid using the currency. Finally, they abandon the currency entirely and refuse to accept it anymore. When people stop believing in money, governments lose the ability to govern. Not through revolt or military coups, but through quiet refusal to participate. Venezuela's crisis is usually blamed on ideology by people on both sides. The left says capitalism and foreign interference caused all the problems. The right says socialism and government control destroyed the economy for everyone. But the real lesson is simpler than any political ideology or theory. You can't print wealth, you can only print paper that represents wealth. Oil made Venezuela rich for decades, bringing in billions of dollars yearly. But oil revenue is volatile, rising and falling with global prices constantly. So the government smoothed it out with debt and printing to stabilize. When oil prices dropped, they printed more to maintain the same spending levels, and more until printing was the policy, the only tool left. The money didn't disappear into thin air or vanish from the earth. It was never real to begin with, just a promise written on paper. It was a promise the government couldn't keep because it lacked real backing. And once people realized that, the promise collapsed and couldn't be rebuilt. So where did the value actually go if the money just evaporated? Not into a vault somewhere hidden deep underground, waiting to be found. It evaporated, destroyed by the printing process itself over many years of hyperinflation, but the value redistributed to different people in different places worldwide. Some went offshore to officials, elites, anyone with access to cheap dollars. Some went to neighboring countries, Colombians selling goods at inflated prices daily. Some went to time as years of savings wiped out overnight for millions of families who had saved for decades in the local currency. And some went to distance, to those who could escape physically abroad. Venezuelans with family abroad survived by sending remittances back home to relatives. Those without connections outside the country didn't survive nearly as well overall. Geography became wealth, and location determined who ate and who went hungry. Over 7 million Venezuelans left the country between 2014 and 2023, nearly a quarter of the entire population, the largest migration crisis in Latin American history, larger than any war-driven refugee crisis in the region. They walked across borders carrying whatever they could fit in backpacks. Families split apart, children sent ahead, while parents stayed to sell everything. The human cost wasn't measured in currency anymore, but in separation and loss. Venezuela's crisis is often called unprecedented by journalists and analysts covering it. But it's not unprecedented at all if you look at monetary history. Weimar Germany in 1923 experienced the exact same pattern of currency destruction. Zimbabwe in 2008 printed trillion-dollar bills that couldn't buy a loaf. Argentina has experienced this multiple times throughout the 20th and 21st centuries. The pattern is always the same, repeated across countries and decades forever. A government that can't or won't tax its population to fund operations. A central bank that prints instead of collecting revenue through normal taxation. And a population that slowly realizes their money isn't money anymore at all. It's just paper with ink and numbers that mean nothing real. Venezuela had more oil than almost anyone on the planet beneath its land, proven reserves that could have funded the country for generations forward. It didn't matter at all in the end, because money isn't what you have in the ground, it's what others believe you have today. And belief, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild or restore over time. People remember, and trust takes decades to rebuild after it's been destroyed. The lesson isn't about politics, it's about the nature of money itself. Money only works when everyone agrees it has value and will tomorrow. The moment that agreement breaks, the money stops being money at all. It becomes paper, and all the oil in the world can't fix that. Welcome to Luxona, the Netflix of finance.